Hello folks, this is John again, and please forgive me, I'm quite tired now for these last couple of days again, and I didn't get to make a TH3 video for today, so let's keep it simple. Today I kind of just want to answer a few questions or interesting comments that came up these last couple of videos. Let's get started.
Don't know if you've talked about this before, but how do you approach vocals with Brian? Do you just send him the instrumentals and let him do whatever he wants? Random question, lol.
Yeah, that's a fine question. Yes, first of all, I finish up writing an instrumental and basically I record rather scratch tracks at first, and then I already sent that off to Brian. So he can come up with melodies and lyrics, and in the meantime, while I re-record the song and also finish it up, give it the final touches, I send him the new version also. With the lyrics and the vocal performance, for the most part, I rather just let him do what he likes. That's how we did it on Inspiring Nightmare, at least. And also for lyrical themes, we just talked about some very basic things, like this is the stuff I don't like, I don't want to have that on my music, this is the stuff I prefer, and preferably also only singing and no screams, and have at it. That's how we went about it. He also sent me the lyrics to check out, just to see that we are on the same page, and also sent me vocal samples and I could chime in with one or the other idea, although I barely ever had any because he just comes up with great stuff right off the bat. And now for this album we actually go a little bit more in depth on what we want to put onto the music in terms of vocals, because I've also gotten a little bit more pedantic on lyrical themes and lyrical devices. But working with Brian is also really great. He's very open to suggestions and values any kind of input. And yeah, it's just great to work with him. You're good, bro, but we don't go at it at a strict song by song basis. This song is about that and it needs to have that kind of lyrical theme and that kind of melody to it. We keep it still a little bit more general, but we are a bit more careful about different lines that perhaps could come across the wrong way, and also general stories or themes Brian may want to put into the music. It's actually a good communication, I'd say. It's very important when you work with different peoples, especially when you do it over the internet via email and you never really go at it face to face. Communication is very, very important. Good work ethics is, to me, much more important than actual vocal skills. I know it sounds weird, but you can have the best vocalist, but when he's impossible to work with, then what's the point? Now it's more stress than fun that way. Okay, before I go on rambling, let's go to the next question.
As far as I remember, Scarlett first generation's instrument inputs had issues with hot pickups. They claim to have that fixed in the second gen. That might be the issue with it.
That's also what I read a lot. The first generation had that problem. Mine also has that problem with clipping. On top of that, it just has a bad DI sound. I did have the chance to hear a DI directly recorded with a second generation Scarlett interface, and it sounded fine. There was no nastiness, it sounded very clear and open, and no clipping, of course. So I think they pretty much fixed the issues. But I'm also starting to wonder about my unit here, if that maybe be faulty or something, because the DI just really sounds bad. And also a bunch of people commented saying they never heard that bad of a DI coming from a Scarlett interface. And the thing with me using the pad on the interface for the guitar DI, that's not really the issue. One guy commented saying that you don't actually use the pad for guitar signals, it's rather for line signals. And so I read it up on the manual again, and it turns out to be true. You don't use the pad for the guitars, which is kind of weird to me. Then how do you handle hot pickups? So they kind of messed that up already in the first generation. It just, why don't you think about that, you know? But I fiddled with that again and checked using the pad versus not using the pad. And yes, not using the pad gives me less clipping. Okay? Notice I'm stressing the word less. It still clips, which is still not good, but it's just not as much as when I use the pad. But on top of that, the eye still sounds the same. It's still nasty. There's still that nasty spike around 3K, and the high end is rolled off and the low end is mushy. It's still useless to me. And also the level, even turning it way down, the level is way too loud. Getting clean tones is quite difficult with that. And distortion tones just get totally distorted and fuzzy and Even if I didn't use the pads there in my comparison with the DIs, it would have still sounded horrible.
Thank you. What if I connected my Pod HD in with no FX on, just a clean empty patch connected to interface with a normal cable? Does it still consider as a DI signal? I tried and I am getting good results.
Yes, that is still the DI signal. The DI signal is just the unprocessed dry guitar signal, and when you don't use any effects on your Pod HD, then you have your DI signal. Doing it like that, I assume you use the line outputs and go into line inputs again on your interface. Of course that works. And if you're getting good results, as you say, then do it. There's nothing to say against it. Just one or the other tip from my side, I would personally try to avoid extra AD-DA conversions. Because basically what's happening there in your setup now, your pod is converting the guitar signal into digital and then back into analog, and then it goes into the interface, and there it's converted again into digital. You know, so you have two AD-DA conversions, and I would personally try to avoid that. The way I do it is I use the SPDIF output on my pod. That means the pod converts to digital, and that digital signal gets sent to the interface. So it always stays digital. So you avoid multiple converter circuitries, because depending on the interface, those may also be mediocre and you don't want to convert back and forth too many times. Another issue that could potentially come up is when you use the line outputs and connect it to line inputs again. Of course you have cables, extra cable connections that transmit analog signals. Therefore, that could introduce more noise. When you keep it digital with the SPDIF, for example, there's no possibility of more noise coming in through that connection or through the cable, because it's all just ones and zeros, and no interference from outside can really mess with that. But if you don't have SPDIF available, of course, you can also use the line connections. Just make sure you use short cables, as short as possible, and high quality, so they are good isolated or insulated. I always get those two words mixed up. So you really keep the extra noise down.
I think that clicking is an unsynced clock.
If you don't know what he's talking about, it's this right here. So what that is, it's just my normal guitar chain workflow. Guitar goes into the pod, goes into the interface, goes to TH3, goes to my general rhythm tone. So my normal guitar playing setup, I just turned off the noise gate, so you can hear the noise floor coming from all around. And that clicking noise, I couldn't yet figure out where that comes from. But I did figure out it's not an unsynced clock between the pod and the interface. Because when I turn down the volume pod on my guitar, that clicking is gone. If it was a miscommunication between the devices, it would still be there. Also, that clicking noise goes up and down in volume depending on what direction I turn and how I hold the guitar. So I'm pretty sure it's some kind of signal in the area that the pickups are picking up. But yeah, I haven't quite figured out what exactly it is. At least I know how to minimize it. When I face that direction, or when I have the guitar here in that direction, then it's very, very low, almost gone pretty much. Stupid thing is I have my guitar usually on the other side, because it's easier to handle that way. So yeah, for recording I have to go the extra mile and turn the other way. Oh man, the first world problems, I tell you.
Great video. What are your favorite cab mic combinations for the pod? Also looking forward to try those tones. Thanks.
Well, it kind of depends what kind of tone we're talking about. For my personal rhythm tones, I really like the XXL plus the 421 dynamic mic combination. It has a very distinct, powerful, roaring characteristic to it that I very much like. The 57s always sounded a little bit too bright and kind of flat, and yeah, I mean for modern grungy tone it works perfectly fine, of course. For me personally, just it didn't quite give me the character I wanted, and also the other microphones either sounded too muddy or too scratchy or had a very nasty resonance spike somewhere. The 421 works pretty much the best for me, at least on the XXL cab. You may just have to watch out for that 2 to 3K range. It can be a little bit overbearing in that configuration. Again, that's the 70% on the parametric EQ with the pod. Also, another tip I already mentioned on the last Everyday Madness video, turn down the resonance on the cab section with your pod tones, because I noticed that actually makes that whole 1 to 3K area quite strong and a little bit nasty, and turning down the resonance smoothens that out and makes it feel a bit more balanced. At the very least, you don't have to do as much EQ fixing later on.
Could you tell what type of monitors do you use? I suppose it is Yamaha, but what type? HS7 or HS8?
Well, these babies here are the Yamaha HS8. Why the HS8 and not the 7 or the 5 or anything? Well, I personally don't get why I would go for a lower or a smaller driver. The general consensus is the smaller the room is, then you also have more or louder low-end wobbly response, and it can get quite boomy and strong, and using smaller drivers kind of naturally lowers the low-end representation of the speakers, so it evens it out. In my opinion, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because smaller drivers don't create very low frequencies in the first place. So how are you going to get any kind of reference from those at all? But then again, in a home studio setting, the rectangular rooms are not made for mixing. When you see a real control room of a recording studio, they are quite weirdly shaped actually. They are built so you get the best representation of what's going on and you don't get any mess in the room acoustics. In your home studio, that's just not the case. So the low end will always be a little bit out of whack no matter what you do. Okay, so in my personal opinion, I would rather actually go for a combination between good speakers and good headphones. I always use my headphones here. These are AKG K271s. I always use those to reference my low end because I just don't trust the low end in my room. I also don't have a lot of bass traps here yet. But when I do use these monitors, I want to feel the low end somewhat. Even if it's a little bit out of whack and I can't really mix the low end reliably, I still want to feel it, I still want to hear it, I still want to have some semblance of what's going on. And if that low end is not there in the first place, I'm personally not a big fan of that. But yeah, to answer your question, I use the HS8.
What drums and bass do you use? They sound pretty good, and I have been trying to find some good sounding drums for literally years. Hope you can answer.
Why, thank you. I use Native Instruments Modern Drummer for the drums. I think those are, until now, they're the best I've ever tried out or heard, at least. The cool thing with Native Instruments drums is you can process them like crazy and somehow they still sound natural. Before that I used Superior Drummer and it easily sounded fake. I don't know why that is, but there's just something to what Native Instruments do with their drums that it just stays natural somehow. I really like that. What's of course also great about these drums is you can mix the raw samples yourself however you like, so they don't force any presets onto you. That is something I absolutely don't like in most drum samplers out there these days. They just give you mix-ready stuff and no option for the raw samples so you can mix it yourself. And that's of course completely fine and all. If you don't have the time or not the interest to get into mixing, then of course those are perfect options. That's totally fine. That's totally fine. Don't get me wrong. It's just for me personally, I really enjoy mixing. I like shaping things to my liking. I like getting this sound that I'm hearing in my head. But when the manufacturers don't provide me with the tools to do that, it can drive me crazy. And for bass, I use the Yamaha RBX 375. It's hanging right there on the wall. I'm too lazy to get up and to get it right now. I don't think they actually sell that anymore. I'm not sure. At least I can't find it in any online shops anymore. It's an alright beginner's 5-string bass, but it's definitely not high quality. The output between the low A string and the other strings is totally different. The low A is quite low in volume also. Pickups are just not that great. And also the mid-range sounds a little bit more honky. It's not very... it doesn't really have a pristine and powerful sound to it. I have to do a lot of processing to make it sound decent enough, at least for what I want to do. And for the tone of the bass, I also use TH3. I use a pretty basic setup. It's really just compressor going to an amp model, going to a cab. No dual track methods. It's just one bass track. And then afterwards I have to do a couple of processing steps, like enhancing the low end with max bass and EQ and more compression, and compressing the low end for itself, and then a little bit of limiting. I actually would like to get a new bass or a different bass at some point. I'm thinking about Marcus Miller jazz bass or Squier jazz bass. I hear pretty good things about those. But yeah, money. I don't really have the cash for that right now. By the way, my Pod HD Pro is still available. Yeah, hit me up if you're interested. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this little question and answer thingy. Whenever more questions or interesting comments come up, then I will talk about those again in here. Actually, most of these questions I also responded to already in the comments. I just thought they may be interesting enough to put into a video. Yeah, in any case, have a great day.